Welcome back, folks. We're on the second of two lectures on Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie. We're going to go over the last couple of scenes here, analyze them, and kind of discuss what's going on, what the significance of these, the dinner party, and finally Tom's monologue here are. So, in the approaching scenes, excuse me, Tom has finally bought into Mother's plan and has brought Jim over in an attempt to get him to woo Laura, or at least introduce him to a potential suitor. He sees this as a means of preparing himself, at least doing right by the two of them for his in in preparation for his exit at the final scene. Now, he's already joined the Merchant Marines. He talks about the war that is coming and talks about the excitement of and the potential of that. And you get a sense that he almost relishes war, that he hates his life so much. But he has a certain responsibility toward Laura. You know, and it's hard not to love Laura and feel kind of some brotherly responsibility for her well-being because, well, she is the stopgap between he and Amanda, the mother. She is the go-between, the sort of arbitrator, as it were. She keeps the peace, and in her own right, she is a dear and gentle soul. So what happens is he brings over Tom from the warehouse, who we find out Laura had a huge crush on in high school. And what does she do? Well, she falls back into her shyness, and she retreats from the room, goes in and plays her Victrola records. This is because, well, of course, we've said that Laura is unique. Laura is been described as having some sort of, well, a physical deformity, but she's also a little emotionally handicapped, too, mostly because of her shyness. And reading the text, you perhaps get the sense that the shyness comes about as a result of her mother's doting and concern. That there's almost a sort of Munchausen's by proxy relationship wherein Amanda maybe needs Laura to be crippled as a sort of apology or defense for the fact that her life didn't turn out like she wanted it to. Right? Laura, or Amanda rather, who is very old South in many respects, as we denoted in the opening line or in the first scene when they're eating dinner together, and Laura says, "Look, I'll get something out of it. I'll get the whatever it was out of the kitchen," and Amanda, rather in a very un-PC way, but at least to a modern audience, says, "No, I'll be the darky," which gives you the sense that that Amanda had this sense of what the South would be like and what her old South was like, and then there's a sort of a note of faded glory to this, to her as at least a secondary heroine of the play, like so many of Williams' female characters. Right? So when they get to the dinner party and Laura makes her at least temporary exit, what Amanda does is regale him with tales of her younger life and what it was like when she was growing up in Mississippi and all the suitors and this and that and the other. If you get the feeling it's creepy and inappropriate, you're quite correct. Because it's almost like she is flirting with Laura's potential suitor. Right? Yeah. So Laura, of course, has retreated to the familiar. Let's see. Tom and we get the sort of insight into Tom too about what his character is like and how he is kind of on the outs with the shop manager at the warehouse because he's constantly ignoring his work. He's going into the bathroom and writing poetry or verse plays or that kind of thing, and he's being lazy. And this time he's done it on a shoebox. It's problematic. But we know that he's already kind of on the way out, because what he has done, he's taken the money that was going to be for the light bill and has paid his entrance dues or union dues for the Merchant Marines. Yeah, so of the three of them, at least we know Tom is going to make his escape. He's getting out of here. Okay. So now then, of course, in the midst of it here, in the midst of the dinner party, the power goes out naturally because, well, of course, Tom didn't pay the light bill. But there is this. Laura eventually does come back. Jim and Laura get together, and there's this beautiful scene where he kind of coaxes Laura out of her shell. He begins. He talks to her, and they talk about high school. She talks about her insecurities and her fears, and from him she learns that he never really noticed those things that made her insecure. Didn't notice her leg, didn't notice any of the things that troubled her or made her kind of a cripple. And he tells her, what you really need is confidence. Now she does, we know that she invites him into her world because she talks about her glass menagerie, her glass animals, and shows him her favorite, which is the unicorn. And the unicorn is symbolic of Laura because she's rare and beautiful, she's pristine, hard to come by, right? And well, to be a bit crass, she's untouched by men, so to speak, much like a unicorn would be. And so, in the midst of this, there's music from down the street, and Jim says, "Hey, why don't we dance?" And so they begin to dance together, and we see here in the scene the flowering of Laura. She's coming out of her shell. She's becoming something more than she had been. And then in the midst of it, they bump the table. And what happens to the unicorn? It gets knocked over and the horn breaks. Now, you can read this a couple of ways here. This could be read as tragic. That a doorway is closed and she can't ever quite go back to the way things were because, well, her menagerie is damaged and the unicorn, which is Laura, has lost her horn. You might also read this as a sort of deflowering. Right? Laura is no longer unique or broken, well, no longer unique or strange or untouched by men. Now she's sullied. But what I like to see it as, and what it should be, or if in any other play, it might be a kind of rebirth for Laura or a coming out for Laura, because she has gotten shut of her insecurities. Do remember that in an effort to give her confidence, Jim kisses her. Right? This is, by all accounts, Laura's first kiss. And she's initiated into the world of men and women. She's not a stranger to it anymore. And so with the unicorn losing its horn is representative of Laura gaining some sense of normalcy and gaining a place in the world of men and women that had been denied to her before, both by her mother and by her own insecurities. But unfortunately, as this is a Williams play, and Williams plays don't typically end with don't finish up with a happy ending. We learn that Jim is engaged to be married, and not just married, but married in a couple of weeks. Jim makes this hasty exit, and Laura, well, you would think she would be crestfallen, and perhaps she is, but she betrays none of it. What she does instead is something kind of beautiful and graceful, and she gives him the unicorn, which is now just an ordinary horse, as a remembrance. Sad, but kind of neat. Okay, so we also have a sort of transformation here for Jim because, Amanda is scandalized and angry. She's upset that she has brought that that Tom has brought Jim here, and she feels like she's done it to make a fool of them all because he's engaged. He's not a viable suitor, and as such, this sort of ruins her future plans for her retirement as a permanent house guest of Laura and her new husband. In the end, Jim winds up leaving them and leaves Laura and Amanda to their fates, basically. He takes off, joins the Merchant Marines, he travels the world. But we know again in this final monologue that in which he breaks the fourth wall yet again, fourth wall which is typically insoluble, even in theater. While there's nothing separating you from the audience, but the middle distance and empty space, it's still a little bit unusual here in the Williams play to address the audience so fully. And so he talks about how far he's traveled and the things that he's done, but ultimately he says he cannot escape Laura. Oh, there we go. He can't get away from the memory of Laura. Yeah. And this is probably very autobiographical in many respects, because Williams himself was haunted by the memory of his well, today we would call him mentally challenged, or mentally challenged sister Rose, whom Laura's meant to represent, hence the name Blue Roses. Yeah. So perhaps maybe the theme here is that no one really escapes. We can't ever get away from our past. The people we betray and leave behind, we never leave them behind fully. They're still with us. Okay. So that is Tennessee Williams' Glass Menagerie. Of course, this is time is short, but this is also available to you as an option for your literary analysis paper. A lot can be done with this play as well. There's a lot of symbolism. There are a lot of family dynamics. There's the desire for escape and the sense of being trapped. And particularly what we learned from Tom's last monologue is you can never really escape. You can never escape the people you betray, and perhaps you can never fully escape family. All right. So that's this is the Glass Menagerie lecture number 2. Here, of course, your lit analysis papers are coming up, so keep those in mind. And we'll talk to you later.